Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. Hey, welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and what a delight for us to have with us today Professor Joel Marks. He is an adjunct professor of American history at Southern Oregon University and also at Rogue Community College, and we're here to talk about his interesting series that he's doing on American history, America at the Crossroads, a constitutional, economic, and cultural exploration, and an opportunity for you to get in on the last of the series of lectures, which will take place tomorrow night. So, Joel, good to see you. How you doing, my friend?
Thank you very much, Perry. It's great to see you.
Good to see you.
I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, this is wonderful. Why did you do this? What brought you to do this?
Well, 40 years ago, I got the idea that the country was in trouble. And I thought that American history was one of the real needs of the country. And I took it upon myself to study American history as much as I could to find out what I believe is the truth of American history. And it just so happens that in this day and age now, we're in 2015, and the country is on the precipice, in my opinion. The Republic is in very bad shape now.
Yeah, it's in serious. And I don't know if a lot of us understand that. We hear the media and other talk shows, commentators talk about that, but from your studies, perhaps even more so than you thought.
Well, the Constitution of the United States is not being studied the way it should anymore. Not only that, the first 7 presidents of the United States, really excluding John Quincy Adams, who was a great man, but he wasn't what you'd call a great president. The first 7 presidents really tried to hone in on the meaning of the Constitution. And from that point, we can glean what the Constitution means and what they really meant by it. For instance, the General Welfare Clause today means any kind of project a congressman or senator wants. By the way, I'm for repealing the 17th Amendment. I think it's time now that we do that. 17th Amendment, of course, is the election of senators popularly. I think we need to stop doing that. I think we need to go back pre-1913, when the 17th Amendment was actually put in practice, and let the state legislatures choose the senators. Because then you'll get states' rights, which we've really broken that boundary of states' rights with the federal government.
You know, I'm hearing more and more people say this, that it's the best way for the states to be represented again back at the federal level.
That's true, because when Lincoln and Douglas had their debate in 1858, Lincoln out-debated Douglas. But it just so happens that the legislature stayed with the Democrats, and they appointed Douglas to be the senator, because that's the way they did it in those days. And of course, Lincoln 2 years later became the president. But if a senator now, let's say we had the old way of doing things, if the senator came back to the district and said, I've got you a sewage plant here in your district, or I've got you a road, or I got you an overpass, and he comes back and says, this is great because we've gotten this, and then the state legislator would say, we don't want that money that you got from the federal government. We want to do it here as the states. And if you do that again, we're not going to reappoint you. Oh my goodness, a chill would go up his spine, and you say, oh, I better not do that again. And then all of a sudden, you've got states' rights. Now, states' rights, of course, has that kind of a negative ring because of the civil rights movement. But states' rights is what we want. We want state sovereignty, because the 10th Amendment lists very categorically, if it's not enumerated in the Constitution, it's the states. And the Constitution really is a state document.
All right, let me say to our viewers and listeners, first of all, Professor Marks is going to be teaching the last of his series, and it'll be tomorrow night from 6:30 to a little after 9, and it'll be at the Medford Library there in the large conference room. Do they just show up? Is that what they do?
Yeah, they just show up, and they come. It doesn't cost anything.
Okay.
It's for free.
Okay. So if you're interested, tomorrow night from 6:30 to about a little after 9, there at the Medford Library in the large conference room, and you'll be taking on the last of this lecture series dealing with restoring America, and I want to get to that in just a moment. But you've been dealing with making of America, capitalism versus socialism, principles, philosophies of the founders, father of the Constitution, founding presidents, and stuff like that. I want to come to number 2, capitalism versus socialism. It seems to be the big debate and argument today. You know, is capitalism being demonized and squeezed out?
Well, this is a great question, Perry. First of all, capitalism, the term capitalism came from Marx, Karl Marx. By the way, I spell my name M-A-R-K-S. There's no X. He termed that, and he actually wanted to do it in a negative way. What we've done and what has happened since the history of man is that we've gone from either tyranny, anarchy, and we've swung back and forth. Socialism has been a very, how shall I say, attractive method of government. It's kind of a lazy way to do things. Right. Capitalism or free market, or free enterprise or free market economics is Adam Smith. And what we need to do now, and what we've done in the country, is we threw Adam Smith out of the colleges and universities in about 1920. We put in Karl Marx, we put in Das Kapital, which is a failure formula, and it's very, very difficult to read. And the Communist Manifesto as well is another failure formula. What we need to do is reinsert Adam Smith's success formula. It was written in 1776, The Wealth of Nations, and let people read that in the colleges. And I have, one of the things I'll mention tomorrow night, I have 11 pages of material that I'm willing to give everybody, all the materials on restoring America. But one of the things we need to do now is, before people graduate high school, they need to have an acquaintanceship with the Wealth of Nations, they need to have an acquaintanceship with the Federalist Papers, and they need to show a proficiency in having read the Constitution and Declaration of Independence and pass that off. There should be a state. We need to do this at the state level so that all the schools can do it, and then they can institute the testing that they want. But they've got to have an understanding of the Wealth of Nations, or at least what it was about, because we've thrown Adam Smith's formula out, and that was an experimental thing that Adam Smith did, and in the late 1800s, early 1900s of the country, that thing exploded, and that's Adam Smith. All of that capitalism that we talk about exploded. Socialism is a failure formula. It has never succeeded where it's been tried.
Well, I'm sorry we didn't know this from day one. I think we should do a series with you on all 7 of these. Let me just ask you one other question, then we'll jump over to your last session coming up tomorrow night. Mm-hmm. There seems to be a blatant ignoring of the Constitution. It is something to get around or to ignore or just violate. There doesn't seem to be the pushback. Where is the checks and balances of what really is constitutional? Well,
we've lost the checks and balances since about 1883 is where we started to lose it. And what has happened in our country is the founders, who really were individual geniuses on what they were doing, they had their foibles, but the beauty of what they did is they were able to sit down and hash this out and work it out together, because in the Constitutional Convention in 1787, in about June, late June, the Constitutional Convention almost broke up. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the convention, Benjamin Franklin wept because he didn't think they could do it. He didn't think anybody could put it together, a group of people, and they actually put it together. And it wasn't just compromisers. There was only 3 major compromisers. It was consensus. It took 60 ballots to get a president of the United States. That's consensus. Everybody has their say. And they had a rule in the Constitutional Convention that you could speak only twice on one subject. Of course, Alexander Hamilton got up one time and spoke for 6 straight hours, but and what he wanted was a government like Britain had. But the reason that we've ignored the Constitution now is because we don't know what the limits of each branch of government is. We were taught in school that the branches are co-equal. That is not true. That's a myth. Every single person I know, and I know because I was taught that in school too, Everybody that I know has been taught that. That is not true. They are not co-equal. The judicial branch of government is very, very weak. And if anybody will take the time and read the 78th Federalist by Hamilton, and I don't even like Hamilton that much, but he was brilliant in the things that he wrote in the Federalist Papers. If they'll read the 78th Federalist, which talks about the judiciary, they'll see what the judiciary was meant to do. It's the weakest form of government. They only give an opinion. They don't have any execution power or enforcement power. The president, and it's been done by 3 presidents, the president can say, like Andrew Jackson did in 1832, Mr. Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it. There's no enforcement power in the Supreme Court. The reason that they have become the last word is because we have allowed that. On this gay marriage issue, the Supreme Court has no right to make any decision on that. That's a decision for each state, the people in that state. And for what California did when they overruled the ballot measure in California, a man and a woman should be a marriage, they did that twice, and then a judge came along and overruled that. Governor Brown of California should have come out very strongly and said, we're not going to listen, we're not going to execute that because, first of all, it's not constitutional, and second of all, the people have spoken. He didn't do that. And that's the way the thing should operate. Now, the legislature, in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 2, there's an exceptions clause in there. And the legislature can do anything they want with the Supreme Court. They created the Supreme Court. They can do anything they want. They can have John Roberts in a candle if they wanted. But it's up. The legislature has that power. They created it. And that's why when Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1935 tried to pack the Supreme Court, he wanted 15. The legislature said no. They were Democrats.
Fascinating. I wish I had you for hours, but what's so interesting about this is that we're seeing the courts now actually legislate. So
right.
we're going to take a break. We'll come back. I want to get into what you're going to be talking about tomorrow night: restoring America, solutions for the courts, solutions for Congress, solutions for the president. Okay, he's the man. He's the professor. We'll be right back with Professor Marks in just a moment. All right, we're back, and what an honor to have with us today Joel Marks. He's an adjunct professor of American history, teaches at Southern Oregon University and Rogue Community College. He's finishing up a series tomorrow night. It's totally free, and it's going to be down at the Medford Library in room 205. Excuse me, that's the address, in the large conference room there in the library in downtown Medford. Starts at 6:30. Probably will go a little past 9, but this will be the end of 7 lectures that Professor Marks has delivered, and this one will be dealing with restoring America. And by the way, you are what they call the professor with the OSU Lifelong Learning Institute. What is that?
That's right. That's mostly retired people, and they come to either SOU or RCC down here, and I teach at both of them, and they can sign up. They pay a certain amount to get into that program for the year, and then they can take as many classes as they want. Okay. And I'm one of the teachers for that program.
Is it credited? I mean, for the students?
They can get 1 credit if they take 10 classes in a row. Like I taught a class on the history of the Cold War, and there were 10 classes there, and they can get 1 credit for that.
All right. Again, he's been teaching a series, America at the Crossroads, a constitutional, economical, and cultural exploration, and we're just kind of highlighted some of these. I've already determined in my mind we're going to have them back. But let's talk about the one you're dealing with tomorrow night from 6:30 on, Restoring America. This kind of culminates everything you've been dealing with over the last 6 weeks.
Right.
Solutions for the court. Do away with them? What do we do?
Well, the legislature could. Yeah. Well, first we have to understand where we got the courts from. In 200 years before Christ, to about 150 BC, a man by the name of Polybius, a Greek man, great historian. Herodotus was probably a greater one, but Thucydides, but Polybius was a great historian, and he came up with the idea for the balance of power, a little bit different than we're doing today. And then 1,800 years later, it took 1,800 more years, and then we got a Frenchman by the name of Montesquieu, who wrote in 1748 a book called The Spirit of Laws. Not read very much. He took 20 years to put that book together. Brilliant book, and he said this is the way to set up a government. And it was just in the nick of time because the Founding Fathers came along and they quoted Montesquieu many times during the Constitutional Convention and during their ratifying conventions because he was the authority. And he suggested you have the executive, you have the legislature. The legislature is where the power is. Right. We get that from the Magna Carta. We always are going back to the Magna Carta. The legislature is where the power is. And then the courts are just there to give an opinion. They're very weak. Now, England used to have the courts and the executive tied together, and that was no good. But the courts are a very weak reed, a very weak part of the government. And all they're supposed to do is interpret the law and give an opinion. And if you ever get one of their cases like the Supreme Court, you'll see on the top it says opinion. There is no enforcement power. Yeah. They can have a writ of mandamus and get somebody before the court, but there's no enforcement power to do what they said because Lincoln, Jackson, and Jefferson overruled the courts on different occasions. We need to overrule Marbury versus Madison. That's a very bad thing. That's got to be gone. Right. And so that's one of the solutions. Okay.
So the courts could be overruled by the legislature or the president. Right. Can the Congress overrule the president?
They could overrule the president, and they have before. And we had.
Other than a veto. Other than a veto override, right?
You've got the veto override,
right?
The two-thirds veto override,
right?
And they did that in Taft-Hartley with Truman, on the right to work. The legislature, if there's a bad decision by the court, and it's first of all. Who takes an oath to the Constitution? The executive does, everybody in the legislature does, and so does the judiciary. It's the same oath. They all take an oath to the Constitution. They've got to follow the Constitution. If the legislature doesn't think the court is following the Constitution, they can override the courts. There is a struggle between the executive and the legislature, too. Now, the executive can say, I'm not going to execute the law. And if the legislature wants to really get in a huff, they can get together and they would have to have a good majority to overrule the president. But they're just supposed to write the law. And what you said in the break is that the courts have been writing the law, and they have. They've written it on many social issues. They have no business talking about social issues. Those are state issues. That's 10th Amendment stuff. That's the states. There's nothing enumerated about Roe versus Wade, 1973. That wasn't only a disgrace because of the issue itself. It's a disgrace because what Justice Blackmun wrote. Right. He was dreaming. He gave the history of all of these various histories of health and the Greek history and Roman history. It was just a horrible decision.
We seem to be in a constitutional crisis at the moment, Professor Marks, that we have a president that seems to be legislating from the executive branch with no pushback from Congress. Now, that's setting the wrong precedents, but he's getting away with it. Isn't it the job of the legislature to stop that?
Yeah, it is. And he's doing something very different than Jefferson, Jackson, and Lincoln did when they did not execute what they thought was unconstitutional. What the president is doing now is he is not executing the laws that the legislature have written. That's a very different thing. Right. And what the legislature has to do, they must override that. You should have Speaker of the House Boehner get up and explain what the Constitution says. He's not doing that. He's getting up and talking about budgets. He's talking about he doesn't like the president doing this. He doesn't think it's good. He's got to explain to the people the Constitution and what the authorities are, and then that would be a good teaching moment.
Congress also has the control of the purse. Yes. So if the president did do something, they could just not fund it.
Well, they had the choice to do that in the Affordable Health Care Act,
right.
And they haven't done that. They've kind of punted on it. They could do that. They have the power of the purse. But, the problem we've got now, Perry, I believe, is that the Congress is not going to change anything because they've done a lot of things very bad over the years. So what we have to do now is take Article 5, and we have to use George Mason's piece of the article where we send it back to the state legislatures. He was very foresighted in doing that in the Constitutional Convention. and you send it back to each state, and you get to 2/3 of the states, and you have a convention to amend the Constitution, and then out of that, you have to have 3/4 of the amendments that they suggested to go through as law. Right. So now we need to go back to the states, and I would prefer that each state elect these people, and it would be for the purposes of the convention, and I would approve an election of people, and I would like to see people elect grassroots people more than even politicians. But you can't get more grassroots than the state legislatures.
All right, so the solution for the president?
Well, the solution for the president, first of all, the president in 1946 got the power of employment. The president has no such power. The president has Article 2 powers. There's hardly anything in there. There's nothing in Article 2. It's mostly foreign policy. The president is not over housing and urban development. They're not over commerce. They're not over a myriad of cabinet positions. When we first started the country, we had Secretary of Treasury. We had an Attorney General. Edmund Randolph was a very good Attorney General. We had the Secretary of State was Jefferson, and we had the Secretary of War, we called it then. We changed it to Secretary of Defense in 1947. We had Henry Knox. You don't need all these various cabinet positions, and you got a Secretary of Education. People have to understand that that's not a constitutional function of the executive branch. And by the way, let me just throw in this, since I'm talking in this one stream of thought here. Executive orders.
Right.
There is no grant for an executive order for the President of the United States except to the executive branch. He tells the Treasury, I would like to have you do this. He tells the Secretary of State, I would like this done. That's all. They don't have this other power. And it was Teddy Roosevelt who started the movement towards executive orders that were not constitutional.
Would you say, Professor Marks, that we're in constitutional crisis?
Oh, there's no question about that.
All right. So is there a solution? Is there hope for us?
Yes. Yeah, there is. There is hope, and it's by way of education and having people understand the situation they're in. There's about 20 to 30% of the people really want to see the change, and that's enough to make the change. That's all we had when we had the Revolutionary War. People can, if they understand the powers of the Constitution, and we have, in my seminar, we have young people coming, and they come up and they say, I've never heard this before. I've never been taught before. And I tell them, you come to this seminar, you will never hear it before you came, and you're not going to hear it after you came. So pick it up right now, and I help them, and I email them, and do all these things. But these are the principles of America, and we can save the country, we can save the principles of America, but first we have to save the culture. That's number one. It's not balanced budgets. The culture is bad. It's in need of help. And Adam Smith, in his great Wealth of Nations, said, you can't have the culture debauch itself. If it does that, you lose everything.
And I would assume when you mean by the culture, we got to restore the traditional family. I mean, doesn't it go back down to that level?
The traditional family, we have to use the first 5 books. We need to read the whole Bible. Most people have a Bible in their home and they never read it. But we need the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and the Anglo-Saxon law is what Thomas Jefferson discovered was the answer to America. And he sent it to Madison with 200 books in 1784, 1786. He sent all of these books. Madison read every single one of them, and he was prepared. And that's the basis of America, is Jefferson. And it's Anglo-Saxon law, which is about 400 to 1000 AD, and then you've got the first 5 books of the Old Testament.
You're an inspiration.
Yay!
I want to do the whole series with you on camera because, you know, again, I think you kind of gave it away. We're not teaching this in school.
Right.
I don't know if it's deliberate. Maybe, I don't know, but
it's deliberate.
Okay, so when you sitting in there and you said you had, when you were week 4 and you're dealing with Washington Creates America, you actually had people break out in tears.
Yeah, because they didn't understand, they never heard the story that in 1770, George Washington was in the western part of Pennsylvania, and he had Dr. Craik with him. Dr. Craik was his doctor who was with him at the end of his life. And Dr. Craik wrote in his diary this experience that they were called in by an Indian chief. And the Indian chief called Washington, Dr. Craik in, and they wanted to talk to them. Now, Washington in 1755 should have been dead at the Battle of Monongahela. There's no question he should have died right there. But the word went out, divine providence is involved with this man. Well, in 1770, he was interviewed by these Indians, and this one Indian chief made a prophecy that he would lead a nation. He would be the spiritual head of a nation that would be the greatest nation that has ever been. And that was in 1770. That prophecy came true. He said more in the prophecy, and I talk about it in my lecture, but it's in the diary of Dr. Craik. It's never taught in the schools. No. Nobody knows about it. And this country is inspired and created by divine providence.
Yeah. You're a delight. I want to have you back. Again, let me just say to our viewers and listeners, catch the last of this 7-week series tomorrow night. It's going to be down at the Medford Library. It's free. It's going to be in the large conference room there. Starts at 6:30. Get there early so you have a good seat. And it'll go a little past 9. I wouldn't be surprised that you won't even know it's 9 o'clock. This stuff will go so fast. So, but we're going to get you back, Professor Marks. Thanks for what you're doing. And again, check it out tomorrow night at the Medford Library. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right
God
back.
Bless you.